On July 17th, 1994, Baggio stepped up to the penalty spot in Pasadena, California, with the World Cup on the line. 5 years minus 7 days later, Brandi Chastain did the same, at the opposite end of the same stadium. The results of these respective kicks are etched in the mind of any sports fan. Baggio missed, Chastain scored. Italy lost the World Cup on Baggio's boot, the United States won it on Chastain's. On the strength of these two moments that happened approximately 85 yards from one another, the Rose Bowl has become the unlikely mecca of the penalty kick, the most evocative, nerve-wracking part of football today. This video will cover 4 instances of the high drama, the tension, the power of the penalty kick. Some will be recent and some will be not, some more famous than the others, and they will ultimately be linked only by the sight of the penalty kick itself, the longest 12 yards in sports. In December of 1890, a shot by East Stirlingshire was headed straight to the roof of the net in a quarter-final tie in the Scottish Cup. The keeper being beaten, Hearts of Midlothian defender Jimmy Adams took matters into his own hands, illegally swiping the ball off the line with his fist. The referee's only recourse at the time was a free kick from about a yard out, and, as something apparently reminiscent of a rugby maul unfolded, the referee mercifully awarded the goal. 3 months later, it happened again. In an FA Cup quarter-final match between Notts County and Stoke City, Jack Hendry illegally used his hands to prevent a goal, only this time, the free kick was successfully defended by Stoke. In the wake of these two incidents, the penalty kick, previously maligned as the death penalty, gained popularity and was eventually instated as a manner of punishing fouls near the goal. 130 years later, we know it well. The penalty kick is the most elemental form of football in the game. 1 player, 1 keeper, 12 yards, the net, 1 chance. Penalties awarded at crucial moments have changed the face of games since they were first introduced, but it wasn't until 1970 that the penalty shootout was approved as a manner of breaking ties in tournament games. The shootout. 5 penalty shots per team, the winner being the side with the most goals after each team has finished their set. If the scores are tied after those initial 5, the shootout progresses to sudden death. Pairs of shots, 1 for each team. If one team makes and the other misses, the game ends. Since 1970, the penalty shootout has been used to resolve thousands of games. Even in moments less consequential than the World Cup final ordeals that Chastain and Baggio faced in Pasadena, the world of penalty kicks is still one of highest tension, of unease and uncertainty, of fear. A penalty in a vacuum is a relatively easy skill, but when you're the center of attention, the weight of the hopes and dreams momentarily resting on your shoulder and hinging on you completing one task, nothing could be simple enough. Amid such tension, skill sometimes seems to take a back seat. There certainly are more and less skilled takers and keepers, but the idea that a penalty shootout is essentially a random process is still prevalent. Sometimes, that's a good thing. Croatia made the World Cup final in 2018, powered by a team coming into its own at just the right time, but they lost in the end. In 2022, they were still good, but they had declined significantly since their prior success. They drew against an ascendant Morocco side and beat Canada 4-1, but they only narrowly avoided a defeat against Belgium that would have sent them home, advancing second out of their group with a 0-0 draw. They advanced through a shootout against Japan in the round of 16, and their quarterfinal opponents would be, well, the arguable favorites. Brazil, football's eternal side. Compared to Croatia, Brazil cruised through their group, winning their first 2 matches, then dropping one against Cameroon, having already clinched a spot in the second round. They hit their stride in the round of 16, dusting off South Korea 4-1, looking to gain momentum to make a run at their first World Cup in 20 years, an eternity for Brazil. These paths crossed on December 9th, 2022. Brazil were massively favored to win, with their odds somewhere in the region of 90% to advance. As such, despite actually having less time on the ball than Croatia, the Brazilians had the best chances. Dominik Livakovic saved numerous opportunities, and the game went into extra time goalless. Livakovic, the hero from the shootout in the round of 16, was quickly becoming the centerpiece of the Croatian side. In extra time, though, Croatia's defense became more and more ragged, and eventually, Brazil, through Neymar, would break through. If Livakovic was revered as the keeper for Croatia, Neymar was the beating heart of Brazil. This was to be his crowning moment, the first time where his heroics could bring Brazil the glory they constantly seek. Usually one goal is enough to win in extra time, where exhausted players rarely can muster the energy for the equalizer. This time, it was different. Through a deflection, Bruno Petkovic scored to tie the match in the 117th minute. It was going to be a penalty shootout to decide. Typically in a shootout, a team will set the player they believe is their best taker as the first or fifth in the lineup, either to set the tone if they're first, or to be calm under pressure, as the fifth shot is most likely to be a do-or-die situation. Neymar will be set to take fifth for Brazil, the most likely to have to close it out, or to keep Brazil alive. The first taker, the Croatian Nikola Vlasic, steps up and calmly roofs his penalty. Up next for Brazil, Rodrigo. Just 21 years old during this tournament, he plays for Real Madrid in Spain, one of the biggest clubs in the world. 5 months after this game, he will bring that club finals glory, scoring 2 in a 2-1 win to take home the Copa del Rey. But here, in Qatar, he steps up with the weight of 215 million on his shoulders, and misses, saved by Livakovic. Immediately, the tides that everyone had expected to carry Brazil to certain victory turn, and draw them towards a stomach-churning defeat. Lovro Majer, brought on during extra time as a substitute for instant offense to try and find an equalizer, calmly sends his penalty down the middle. Because keepers don't have enough time to react and judge the flight of a penalty shot, they often attempt to judge the kicker's motion and guess where the ball will end up. And audacious kickers such as Majer will take advantage of the keeper's tendency to always dive and kick it straight down the middle. Casemiro comes up and narrowly beats Livakovic to find the side netting on the left. Then it's the turn of Luka Modric. The talismanic captain of Croatia was the driving force behind their run to the final in 2018, and he's been the engine of the squad today, wearing his 37 years like it was nothing. He comes up and sends Alisson the wrong way, not that guessing right would have helped on a perfect penalty, also buried to the left side post. Alisson, the Brazilian keeper, is one of, if not the best active goalkeepers in the world, and, as can happen with penalties, it just is not his day. Pedro comes up for Brazil, and he sends Livakovic guessing wrong to keep his country in it. Mislav Orsic comes up as Croatia's fourth taker, and he finds the inside of the left post as well to score. With Orsic's penalty, Brazil no longer have any room for error. Marquinhos comes up knowing that a miss will eliminate him. In the highest pressure moment of the PSG man's career, he comes up to the spot. If he can score, and Alisson, their heroic keeper, can make a stop, Neymar comes to the spot with the chance to tie, a certainty under the circumstances. So Marquinhos considers he needs to score. 3 of the last 4 takers tried to finesse the ball to the left side, so that's just what he does. Brazil lose a match they could have at various stages have been considered prohibitive favorites to win. Neymar, the hero perpetually in waiting, never even got to take a shot. The combined pre-tournament transfer value of the 4 Brazilian takers and the keeper was 270 million euros. That's not even counting Neymar, who would have added 75 million to that figure if he had had his chance. Even within this shootout, Brazil were, by all means, giants. That makes Livakovic and the rest of the Croatians giant killers. Their combined transfer value in the shootout? 54.5 million. That's almost 5 times less. That is the penalty shootout. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the top rivalry in the English Premier League was between Arsenal and Manchester United. Over a 7-year stretch, these two held a duopoly on the Premier League title, and their rivalry burned fast and hot, sparking numerous infamous incidents. On December 20th, 2003, right at the start of the new season, Arsenal visited United's famous ground, Old Trafford. The game was chippy and nasty, emblematic of a rivalry that will boil over into multiple matches that are given the title Battle of, including this one. Arsenal's manager Arsene Wenger seemed to know what was up from the pre-match, having selected a more physical side than usual. United, having also gone for a defensive and physical focus, were the more progressive of the sides, but there was little action until the latter stages of the match. In the 80th minute, Ruud van Nistelrooy jumped on the back of Patrick Vieira, Arsenal's captain, going for a header. Vieira, frustrated, kicks out towards the United man, who reels as if he's been kicked for real. The referee steps up and delivers a second yellow to Vieira and sends him off. Although with hindsight, the referee probably did do the right thing. It's easy to see how Arsenal, who believed that United had benefited from preferential refereeing for years due to their premier status, could have felt hard done by, especially thanks to the involvement of Van Nistelrooy, who Thierry Henry, an Arsenal legend on the field for this game, will later say was constantly trying to get Arsenal men sent off. With just 10 minutes left, Arsenal bunker down to hold on to their away point, and Manchester can't find a way through. In the final minutes of the game, Gary Neville swings in a lazy cross, and United forward Diego Forlan goes down as if he's been pulled down by Martin Keown, and the referee awards a penalty. The 2003 standard definition cameras don't show everything in perfect clarity, but this definitely does look like a dive from Forlan. Nevertheless, 16 years too early for a video review, United will have a chance from the penalty spot to put the game away. Who else steps up but Ruud van Nistelrooy? The man most emblematic of Arsenal's lasting fury against United is the one who comes up to deliver the final blow. Van Nistelrooy steps up. As the ball cannons off the crossbar and is cleared away to safety, everything comes pouring out for Arsenal as the game goes full time in a 0-0 draw. Martin Keown, the man essentially framed for the foul, jumps and screams right in the face of the striker, an image which will become famous and encapsulate this era of rivalry. United this season will eventually slump to third place with their worst points haul since 1991. Arsenal, on the other hand, will go undefeated in all 38 matches and win the league in their famous Invincibles season, an unprecedented and as yet unmatched feat in the Premier League era. The 2010 World Cup was held in South Africa, the first ever African World Cup. Despite that, Ghana were the only African country to make the knockout stage. After they beat the US to advance to the quarterfinals, they would face Uruguay. Historical convention tells us that Uruguay should have had no trouble, but this Ghana squad was one of their best ever. The centerpiece was Asamoah Gyan. He had scored 3 goals in 4 games, including the winner in extra time against the US, and had established himself as one of the best players in the tournament. Soli Montari and John Mensah were also key pieces in that squad. Their opponents in the round of 16 would be Uruguay, a team peaking at just the right time. Their mercurial superstar Luis Suarez also had 3 goals in 4 games like Gyan, including a brace against South Korea that sent them to the quarterfinals. At the Soccer City Stadium in Johannesburg, Uruguay would be predicted to win, but the Black Stars had the best chances. At the end of the first half, Soli Montari hit from long range and scored a dream goal to put Ghana with 1 foot in the semi-final. If they win, they'll be the first African country ever to reach that stage. There would be no better place to do it than this. Coming out of the half, Uruguay pushed to get back in it, and soon got a free kick at a tight angle outside the box. Our old friend from Manchester United, Diego Forlan, whips it in, and, perhaps expecting a cross, the keeper Richard Kingson can't get a hand to it, and it sails right in. The World Cup ball in 2010, the Jabulani, was the abortive first attempt at technologizing the football, and it was by all accounts a total disaster. The complaints of players were largely laughed off, but retrospective experiments would reveal that the aerodynamic properties of the Jabulani caused the flight to become unstable at typical free kick velocity. The keeper here hasn't exactly covered himself in glory, but the flight of the ball certainly played a part. At any rate, the game was tied. Both teams spent the rest of regular time and almost all of extra time searching fruitlessly for a goal. At the very end, a free kick ends up in a wild scramble in Ghana's attacking penalty area. With keeper Fernando Muslera far out of position, Dominic Adiyia hits a forceful header right towards net, towards Luis Suarez on the line. Realizing he cannot stop it legally, he takes the only action he feels he can. He swipes at it and blocks it with his hands. The referee sees the offense and sends Suarez off and awards the penalty. This situation is exactly what the penalty kick was introduced for, and Asamoah Gyan steps up. He knows this will be the last kick of the game. 2 of his 3 goals in the tournament have come from the spot, and he steps up to bury one more and put his country in the semi-finals. Immediately the ref blows the whistle for full time, and it goes to a penalty shootout. Gyan will later say he saw Muslera going to the side he was shooting at and tried at the last moment to elevate it to avoid the save and just overdid it. Forlan scores to open the shootout, then Asamoah Gyan himself, mere minutes after sending Ghana's ticket to the next round right over the bar, steps up for their first penalty of the shootout. Showing immense courage, he steps up and nails it, but it will prove not enough. After the next 2 Uruguayans and the next Ghanaian score, the Black Stars' captain John Mensah sees his kick saved by Muslera. Maxi Pereira sends his kick over the bar, but Adiyia, the man whose header had been illegally stopped by Suarez, also can't get it past the keeper. Sebastian Abreu comes up and chips in the winner, sending the last African country home in the first African World Cup, in one of the cruelest World Cup exits ever. It is really, really hard to find a silver lining in this game. Sometimes people say that football repays its debts, but Ghana are still waiting on full recompense for that night. However, the next time these 2 teams would compete came in the 2022 World Cup group stage, during the tournament that would eventually see Morocco become the first ever African semi-finalists. Ghana and Uruguay once again met for the final match of the group stage. Ghana missed a penalty, and Uruguay scored 2 goals off the back of the miss to go up 2-1, and it seemed like another penalty kick nightmare for the Black Stars. Uruguay were safely on to the next round, until 2 goals from South Korea in a simultaneously played game had them beating Portugal and moving on in place of Uruguay on goal difference alone. Suddenly, Uruguay needed another goal. In a wild last 8 minutes of defense-turned-off football, where the present score suited nobody and both teams needed goals, the 2-0 result improbably held. Ghana were out, but so were Uruguay, having been held to just the 2 goals. With 2010 on their minds still, even though they were out, the Ghanaian fans were singing, they were celebrating, having finally gotten something back against Uruguay, against Suarez. The single tournament with the most history in the shootout is the African Cup of Nations by a mile. 6 of the 12 finals in the 21st century have gone to penalties, a dramatically higher rate than virtually any other tournament. In 2015 then, it would have been a familiar feeling for fans as the final between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire went to penalties after 120 minutes of goalless football. It would have been extra familiar for Côte d'Ivoire, who had been in a 0-0 penalty defeat in the final just 3 years earlier to upstart Zambia. but that is a story for another time. Côte d'Ivoire had spent the last decade in one of the classic dilemmas of non-European footballing nations. Les Éléphants had a roster stacked with players who had found huge success in European club football, but who seemingly couldn't replicate their performances playing for their country. The biggest star of this present Ivorian golden generation, Didier Drogba, had retired from international football just a year before the 2015 tournament, having never brought home any silverware for his country, having missed a penalty in extra time of the Zambia final in 2012. Even without Drogba, the greatest Ivorian player ever, this squad was massively talented. Cheick Tiote, Gervinho, and the two Touré brothers highlighted the roster. They had two uncharacteristic draws in group play before taking off. They took home 3 straight wins, the last 2 at comfortable 3-1 margins that sent them to the final. Ghana met them there, having taken a loss to Senegal before marking 4 straight wins, the last 2 at 3-0 blowouts in an even more dominant route to the final. The Black Stars were dealing with largely the same paradox as Côte d'Ivoire though, having a roster of successful players in European club football who could never bring it home for the national squad. Asamoah Gyan had risen to the captaincy of this squad, and the Ghanaians also sported a pair of brothers as well, the Ayus, who had led them in attack and starred at Ghana's 2014 World Cup effort. Ghana, remembering the trauma of 2010, would have been relieved after their first taker scored, and Wilfried Bony smacked his first off the crossbar. Jordan Ayew calmly scored, then up stepped Junior Tallo for Ivory Coast. Gervinho, whose antics and eventual miss in the shootout in 2012 were fresh on Ivorian minds, and he was subbed off for Tallo when it was clear it would go to penalties. However, Tallo binned his own penalty, sending it far wide. All of a sudden it was a mountain to climb for Les Éléphants. Another shootout loss and another final. To make things worse, they would have to rely on Boubacar Berry in goal, who was their backup goalie forced into action due to an injury in the semi-final to their main starter. Berry, 35 years old at the time, was considered as essentially a comedic figure in net. Here he is eating some grass during the World Cup. Back in the 2012 final, he didn't save any of Zambia's 9 penalties as they lost their best chance yet at the title. But here, Berry did something atypical. He saved from Aqua to allow Serge Aurier to draw one back. Next, his correct guess forced Achampong to adjust and miss his shot, and Doumbia scored to level the shootout, just as quick as they had fallen behind. Andre Ayew scores his pen, putting Yaya Touré on the spot. With the whole tournament on the line, the rock of the Ivorian side scores, and suddenly the shootout was in extra frames. Ghana was shooting first, meaning that every time they score, the next Ivorian taker would be compelled to score, or else they would lose on the spot. Conversely, if a Ghanaian player misses, the next Ivorian can win instantly by scoring. A team's planned penalty lineup doesn't go beyond the first 5 scheduled takers, so the shooters and extra kicks are the ones considered either unable or unwilling to take a penalty. Usually, the combination of pressure and begrudging takers brings the shootout to a swift end, but not here. Instead, nobody for the next 10 shots buckles, despite each Ivorian knowing that a miss meant game over. Berry got close twice, getting hands to 2 shots to his right side post, but they both slip out of his grasp. With 10 players for each side having stepped up, the goalkeepers are now forced to take penalties. Ghana's keeper, Brima Razak, goes towards his right post, and the end-fancied Berry comes up huge, finally making another stop. Next, it's his job alone to finish the game. Struggling with a cramp after the save, Berry struggles to the spot, walks up, takes a booking from the ref for time wasting, and scores. It's dreamland for Les Éléphants, finally fulfilling their promise of a continental trophy, and another penalty nightmare for the Black Stars. Boubacar Berry, the hero, would retire from international football straight after this tournament, and play his last football altogether in 2017, with this final as his certain finest moment. Ghana, having suffered yet more penalty kick agony, would never reach another AFCON final. Some people have called for a substitute for the penalty kick, or at least a modification, saying it's too big a reward, which is a valid criticism that draws its roots all the way back to the procedure's inception. The aforementioned idea that the penalty shootout is a lottery is also fairly common, and there have been calls to find another way to decide matches tied after 120 minutes, based on the idea that penalties can't reflect the team's merits. Surely, throughout this video, there has been some sense of that, of the vicious randomness inherent to penalties and the shootout. Despite that, I love penalty kicks and the shootout as concepts. There is nothing in football as compelling, as elemental as the penalty, and it lends drama to tournament play that something like golden goal overtime could never deliver. In 2013, Watford were playing Leicester in the tournament to decide promotion to the Premier League. Based on the first fixture and the present results of the second, Watford needed another goal to advance. As the game approached the final moments of stoppage time, Leicester's Anthony Knockaert dribbled into the box and then dove to the ground, but was rewarded with a penalty that would put the nail in Watford's coffin. This might be the worst the penalty kick's inclusion can get, when it magnifies an iffy foul call and kills off a game. But sometimes, things are different.
Knockaert takes, Almunia saves, Knockaert follows in, Almunia saves again! Absolutely astonishing. Now here come Watford. Forestieri. Here's Hawk! Deeney! Do not scratch your eyes! You are really seeing the most extraordinary finish here!
Sometimes the penalty kick breaks through the conventions that upholster football and its tactics, and allow us to see the truly jaw-dropping and miraculous. Call it a lottery, call it a gifted goal, but to me, it's nothing other than itself. That is the penalty kick.